Chair Claren,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh,
Here.
Commissioner Taylor,
Here.
Commissioner Freeman is noted absent.
All right, if you could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. How about Dylan? You want to lead us?
States of America. Indivisible, liberty and justice. All.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open up for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda this evening. I would go through the 3-minute shtick, but nobody's getting up, so I'm going to close public comment. Next is approval of minutes from August 20th, 2024.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Haley? Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor.
Yes.
We're going to move on to 6.1 on the agenda. Planning application 2024-92, Rocker Memorial Skate Park time extension. I believe staff has a presentation for us.
Yes. Good evening, Commission. I'm here tonight to talk with you about our first agenda item, which is a time extension for the Rocker Memorial Skate Park. This was a project that was approved in June of 2022. It included a approximately 25,000 square foot outdoor skate park and 28 parking space lot. It's going to be operated by the Rec District at the regional park. We had a few different entitlements that were required for that project. One was adoption of a mitigated negative declaration. There was a development permit, a minor use permit, and a zoning clearance. And under the resolution, the land use entitlements were required to be exercised by July 5th, 2024. A little background on the project. This is the location, which is across Estates Drive from the existing skate park and across from the rodeo grounds. This was the approved site plan. And this is a rendering of the project. In support of the time extension request, the applicant submitted a justification letter. They explained that they need additional time to complete the construction of the project and address some remaining conditions of approval. They've submitted for a grading permit, and that's in process, but they said that they need some additional time to complete that and do additional fundraising. One of the things that's changed since the project was approved is that we have a new general plan. For this site, it was designated as public previously. Under the new general plan, it's open space recreation. So we haven't updated the zoning yet to be consistent with the general plan since, as you know, tonight we're doing our first round of general plan implementation. So this will be a future item that we'll address. In terms of what the open space recreation designation is, it's for areas that provide recreational opportunities, includes parks, either public or private, including the regional park. So as we implement this new designation, we'll be looking at the zoning for that, and we'll need to acknowledge the fact that the regional park has an existing mix of uses. There are some requirements in the general plan for 90% open space that wouldn't be able to be met at the regional park just because it's already got a certain amount of development. So we'll be addressing all of that when we come back to you with a future zoning code update. So we feel that this use is still consistent with the general plan in terms of the new designation and the intent of that, and that you can make the required findings to approve the time extension. As I mentioned, the zoning hasn't been updated, so it's still public facilities. So we reviewed the time extension requests for consistency with that. And while we've had some development code updates since this project was approved, there was nothing that needed to be updated in terms of the conditions of approval. And in terms of the time extension findings in the development code, the requirements for the commission to approve the extension would be that the applicant's made a good faith effort to exercise the permit and has exercised due diligence in seeking to establish it, and that the land use permits are still in compliance with the development code and general plan. Since the applicant is pursuing their permits for the project, we believe that that is sufficient to meet the findings for the time extension. And in terms of the environmental review, As I mentioned, a mitigated negative declaration was adopted that addressed all of the environmental impacts of the project and included mitigation measures that were required to reduce or eliminate all of the potential impacts. Since those are all still applicable, the time extension is really just extending the time, so it's not creating any additional impacts. So we think that you can find the time extension exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15061B3, which states that where there can be seen with certainty that there's no possibility of a significant impact on the environment, the activity is not subject to CEQA. So our recommendation tonight is that the Commission adopt Resolution 2024-14, finding the time extension exempt from CEQA and approving the 2-year time extension. If you choose to take action tonight, you could also choose to continue the hearing if you feel that you need additional information, find the CEQA exemptions not suitable. You could approve the time extension subject to adding, modifying, or eliminating any of the conditions, or you could deny the time extension if you find that the required findings can't be made. If you do take action, the appeal period would end on Friday, November 8th at 5:00 p.m. And that's the extent of the staff presentation. We do have some members of the applicant team here in case you have any questions for them.
And no applicant presentation. Okay.
Correct.
All right, and clarifying questions for staff. Oral, Sammy, Dave? Nothing. I don't have any either. We're going to open up for public comment on. Go ahead.
So the applicant, who's representing the applicant? Okay. Just out of curiosity, if you guys would step up to the podium there so we can hear you. And it looks like you guys are just working on raising some more funds. And I'm curious to know, on a percentage basis, where you're at. We've got 75% of the funds we need, 50%, 60%. What would you say? I call it. Is it red light, or there should
Green
be
light.
Green light maybe on there?
Green light's on now.
Yeah, you're good.
Gotcha. So what we've actually been working on for the last 27 months is simply getting the conditions of approval done while concurrently fundraising. What has taken so long is a tri-party agreement for maintenance of the sidewalk that we're required to put in. So there's been a lot of town lawyers and PUD and Park District lawyers involved. So literally that's what's taking us so long. That has dramatically impacted our fundraising. In terms of cash in hand, we have roughly 30%. When you include in-kind donations, that gets closer to around 50%. But we do need big money to get this over the hump. Over half of it is the civil improvements for the site. So that's a lot of money. So we're hoping that with permits in hand, we've done the work over the last now 6+ years in the permitting process to actually show that we are the only shovel-ready project from a Parks and Recs perspective in Truckee. And hopefully that can get us over the hump and we'll be able to actually break ground next year.
Cool. So 3 parties involved in this maintenance agreement?
At a minimum.
At a minimum. Parks and Rec, town, PUD?
PUD. So PUD is the landowner on a 99-year lease to the Park District. The town of Truckee requires the civil improvements that include the curb gutter sidewalk. And literally what we're talking about is snow removal on the sidewalk that we're required to put in.
And have you guys incurred a lot of expenses in regards to that, managing the legal process?
We've spent over $200,000 of publicly raised money to get to this point today.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'd love any support.
yeah.
we can
I would
get.
love to give you an opportunity to get on your soapbox for fundraising, but this is not the right venue for that.
I understand.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any other questions? Now I'm going to open up for public comment. So anybody that has a comment on item 6.1 on tonight's agenda? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Discussion amongst ourselves.
Seems like something that's it's already been approved. The public wants it.
I'm in support of the time extension, and I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
Motion to approve Resolution 2024-14, finding the time extension extension exempt from the CEQA pursuant to section 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines and approving a 2-year time extension for the Rocker Memorial Skate Project.
Second,
Chair Claren,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh,
yes.
Commissioner Taylor.
Yes.
The motion is unanimous. Approved. Thank you. Good luck.
Good luck, you guys.
All right, on to 6.2. Pioneer Commerce Center Building K4 Development Permit and Zoning Clearance. We have Laura again on another staff presentation. Yay.
You'll see me a lot tonight.
That's good.
All right, so this is a project for the construction of building K4 in Phase 2 of Pioneer Commerce Center. The Phase 2 project was originally approved in 2005 and included 11 buildings and related site improvements. 4 of those were constructed before the development permit expired in 2007. The commission approved a new development permit in 2016 to allow the build out of the remaining buildings and made some subsequent modifications in 2016 and 2017. As well as changes to the plan development in 2019. To date, all of the buildings have been constructed except building K4. And since the entitlements for that building have expired, the applicant is requesting new land use approvals to construct the building. So what is requested tonight is a development permit and a zoning clearance for the boat storage building. This is the location of the site. And some additional background, we don't have to go through all of this, but originally the project was approved in 2001 with the 3 phases of development. And as I mentioned, the approvals expired in 2020 for building K4. A new application was submitted in 2023, and we originally scheduled a hearing with the Planning Commission in October 2023, but continued that due to an active code compliance case. So since that time, we've been working through a number of steps with the code compliance case. And as of this month, the town council extended the compliance deadline that they had previously set to June 2025. A consultant started work to look at the existing building that was constructed and do some testing on the site and to sort of determine the next steps with that, whether it can remain or whether it would need to be deconstructed. So as of today, they were out in the field doing that work. So we're just waiting for the formal report from the consultant on that. So due to the fact that the applicant's been actively working towards resolving the code compliance case, consistent with what the town council directed, the town has agreed to concurrently process the permits that they would need to move this project along. As part of the resolution tonight, there's a condition of approval that identifies that the approval is subject to compliance with all required code enforcement actions pursuant to the town council resolution, and that if there's a failure to comply, then that would result in revocation of the land use approvals. So the current application requests approval of a development permit and zoning clearance. The proposed building is just under 12,000 square feet and 50 feet tall. The original size of the building was slightly larger, was reduced from 12,800 square feet, but no other changes to the building architecture or site design are proposed as part of the application. So here's where that building is located within the site. And there's a building elevation and a photo of one of the boat storage buildings that's already been constructed. In terms of general plan consistency, the Pioneer Commerce Center was initially approved under the 1996 general plan. So with this application, we were looking at it under the 2040 general plan, which has a lot of policies related to industrial uses and the need to have those for a strong four-season economy. So that includes providing sufficient land for industrial and supporting a variety of industrial uses. And with the new general plan, the maximum FAR is 0.25. And the housing element requires new developments to provide housing based on the number of jobs created. But housing units were previously constructed as part of the overall Pioneer Commerce Center project that satisfied both Phase 1 and Phase 2 with their workforce housing requirements. So our belief is that the project is consistent with the 2040 general plan. We also looked at current development code consistency. There were a few things that were addressed. There's the parking demand, which comes out to 5 spaces. There was a parking analysis prepared for the Phase 2 project, and 9 spaces to the east of the Building K4 site were identified. Those are proposed to be constructed with this project. Bicycle parking was not required with the original project. Under the current standards, it would require 3 spaces. The applicant's proposing to construct 3 new spaces to the west of Building L, because that's where they think it makes more sense and would get more use within the site. There's some other requirements like landscaping. There was a landscape plan approved for all of Phase 2, but there was no landscaping required for this particular building. Solid waste, that storage has been provided within the site, and then there was a snow storage plan that was previously approved for Phase 2. So compliance with that's required for the new building. So with conditions of approval that are recommended, we think the project's consistent with the development code. We have a couple changes to the conditions from our engineering division. They worked with the applicant on some requests that they had. One was to allow a little bit of additional time for their B&P operation and maintenance plan, because it doesn't just include this site, it includes Phase 2 overall, so that's a little bit more complicated than what the normal requirements would be. So engineering thought it was reasonable to require that prior to certificate of occupancy. And then after doing some looking into the requirement for condition of approval 25, which was about Lahontan requirements, they determined that that condition is no longer required. So they're proposing to strike that. In terms of environmental review, we're proposing that the commission find the project exempt from CEQA per section 15332, which is the infill development project exemption. We haven't received any public comment on this project, and all of the agency comments that were received have been incorporated into the proposed conditions. So in summary, we believe that the construction of this building will allow the Phase 2 project to be fully built out. It was initially envisioned in the early 2000s as a large-scale industrial subdivision, and over time it has fulfilled an ongoing need in the community for industrial square footage. Any new requirements that are applicable today have been incorporated into the conditions, as well as the condition related to the code compliance case. So it's staff's opinion that the findings necessary to approve the development permit and zoning clearance can be made, and we're recommending approval of the project tonight. So our recommendation would be to adopt Resolution 2024-15, determining the project exempt from CEQA, and approving the development permit and zoning clearance subject to the conditions of approval. You could also choose to continue the hearing, find that the exemption from CEQA is not suitable, approve the entitlements subject to adding, modifying, or eliminating the conditions of approval, or denying the development permit and zoning clearance if you find that the required findings can't be made. If you take action tonight, this would be the end of the appeal period, November 8th, 2024 at 5 p.m. And again, we have some members of the applicant team here if you have any questions for them, or I'm happy to answer any for staff.
Any questions for staff? Applicants, presentation? No? Maybe. Open to public comment. Now's the time for the public to speak about item 6.2 on tonight's agenda. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Discussion amongst ourselves, deliberation, comments, questions, complaints. Coral? Sammy? Dave? Then I need a motion, please.
I move that we adopt Resolution 2024-15, determining the project to be exempt from CEQA per Section 15-332 of the CEQA guidelines and approving the development permit and zoning clearance subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Oh, can we clarify that it would be with the modifications to the engineering conditions?
With the modifications to the engineering commission conditions as presented.
Is that good, Sammy?
Second. Chair Claren?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you very much. Good luck. You're welcome. Right on to public hearings. Item 7.1, 2040 General Plan Implementation Development Code Amendments. Staff presentation, Laura again, with Yumi, who's not here. I kind of assumed that, but she's not here right now, so.
Okay. Well, we're going to tag team this presentation, but the first part of it's mine, so we can go ahead and get started. So tonight, oh, there she is. Tonight, we're talking about our first round of amendments to implement the 2040 General Plan. In August, we had a discussion item with the Commission to give you an overview of the Development Code updates. And tonight, we're asking for the Commission to make a recommendation on the Development Code amendments, the zoning map amendments, and general plan cleanup amendments. The next step in the process would be Town Council's review. So tonight, we're talking about a few different Development Code items. One is the creation of some new mixed-use zoning districts, which are the corridor mixed use and neighborhood mixed use. Creation of by right housing for compliance with state housing law, and cleanups that are required for general plan consistency. Then we also have some zoning map amendments to ensure consistency with the general plan land use designations and general plan cleanup amendments, including the land use diagram and noise contours. So we'll jump into our first discussion topic tonight, which is the mixed-use zoning districts. The corridor mixed-use land use designation shown on the map here is in the kind of dark pink. That's in the gateway area of town. And this designation allows a pretty wide range of uses, including multifamily residential, retail office, and has some requirements for building orientation that's really designed to create a pedestrian-friendly environment, allows horizontal and vertical mixed-use development, and prohibits standalone residential. There's some different density requirements depending on which part of the designation the site is located in. It's either 12 to 24 dwelling units per acre or 6 to 18. And then there's a maximum 1.25 FAR, which includes the 1.0 base FAR plus a potential 0.25 FAR incentive. The next is neighborhood mixed use, which is a couple areas of Donner Lake and Glenshire, which are circled here. This is really intended to provide neighborhood-serving commercial uses, including restaurants, offices, small retail, and also allow multifamily residential. This designation really supports the idea of these mixed-use centers in residential areas to increase local services and reduce vehicle trips. It has a density of 6 to 8 dwelling units per acre and a maximum FAR of 0.8, including the 0.6 FAR plus 0.2 FAR incentive. So the first question that we looked at is, what is mixed use? Under the Development Code definition, it includes a variety of uses, such as office, commercial, institutional, and residential, when it's combined in a single building or site, in an integrated development project with significant functional interrelationships in a coherent physical design. And a site can include contiguous properties. So when we were looking at how to implement these new land use designations, we looked at a few specific areas. One was existing development. How do we move towards conformance with the new standards over time without creating an unnecessary burden on existing businesses or property owners? For new development, how do we ensure consistency with the general plan and the vision for the CMU and NMU areas in terms of what types of mixed use are required, and also addressing residential components for new projects? And then creating new standards for CMU and NMU that implement the designations, and providing some clarifications to the existing downtown mixed-use standards. Since we brought our draft to you in August 2024, we've made some updates. One was a commissioner request that we change the site coverage standard for NMU and CMU to a no maximum in Table 2-11, so we made that change. We also added a footnote to Table 2-11 that talks about existing standalone residential projects and what standards apply to those. We added some language to clarify that ADUs don't count toward the floor area increase calculations, to provide an exemption for existing developed sites in downtown mixed use from the minimum density requirements, to clarify that workforce housing exemption applies to workforce housing that's required pursuant to the development code. And we added a residential component for new development projects that propose over 10,000 square feet of floor area. So we had a few different discussion topics for you in the staff report. And we can come back to these when you're ready to start discussing. But just briefly, the first is sort of the idea of mixed use and whether that definition in the development code, which doesn't obligate a project to provide residential uses if that's meeting the intent of the general plan. Next is the proposed mix of uses. So we came up with some standards for what the minimum amount of commercial floor area in a mixed-use project would be in CMU and NMU, depending on the specific areas of town and what we thought made sense based on the general plan direction. And then requiring the residential component for larger projects. So those are things that we are specifically asking you to talk about tonight. Obviously, you can have additional discussion on any of the items that you would like. We've received a couple of public comments. One is from Jeannie McCarthy, who owns a commercial property at Donner Lake. The current zoning for that is neighborhood commercial. And she had comments on the types of uses that are proposed to be allowed in NMU. Tahoe Forest Hospital requested some edits, and we were able to address some of those today in terms of the public hospital/office land use designation, consistency with some of the zoning districts, revising some language about retail uses on the ground floor. Currently, the language says that it's generally prohibited. So we're proposing to change that to prohibited on the front of the ground floor of the building, really because the goal there is to have that pedestrian activity. And then to sort of prioritize retail, trade, and service uses on other ground floor spaces by allowing those types of uses by right rather than through a discretionary process. We updated some numbering of the sections and how the trigger for a development permit versus a zoning clearance is identified in the land use tables. And we had a list of other edits that were requested, and we feel that those are really something that the council previously wanted to see addressed through a master plan, which at the time when the general plan was adopted was still in the works, but that is no longer an active application. So the council had some specific goals that they wanted to address with the master plan for the hospital area. So we think that this is definitely something that we're going to be addressing as part of future implementation, whether that's through another master plan that's initiated by the hospital or through a similar process if the town council directs us to undertake that. So we think a lot of that can be addressed and really needs to be sort of looked at comprehensively.
Switching gears to the second discussion topic, we'll be talking about by right housing, which is a new topic that you didn't look at in August. This is actually a program that it's a new chapter we're proposing within the housing article of our development code, which is being driven by rather than the 2040 general plan, it's being driven by the state and the 2019-2027 housing element, which was adopted in 2019. So there's a program in there, H1.1, which to be consistent with state law, required the town to allow for housing projects by right in 5 specific sites that were previously identified in 2 housing elements but were never developed for housing. So in order to meet state requirements, they required us to allow for by right housing. So those sites are the Upper MacIver site, and we can talk about where those locations are if you need a little more context. The 2 sites called the Arnold DRH site, high density residential, Arnold DMU site, which is along the river on West River Street, the Winter Creek multifamily project site, which is actually a project you looked at recently and was recently approved, and then a site in the Jordan Ranch Parcel 4, which is identified for workforce housing currently. So those are the 5 sites that are being targeted as part of this by right housing change. So by right in this instance is means that projects that cannot be subject to discretionary review by the town if the project meets objective standards. So all projects that meet the required criteria would be reviewed at the staff level to ensure all those items are being checked off. It will, regardless of size, it will not come in front of the Planning Commission. The main criteria that the developers would have to meet for the housing project would be that it would have to meet the minimum density of 15 dwelling units per acre for the housing development site. 20% of the housing units are required to be affordable to lower income households. And then the project has to meet objective standards, meaning the objective design standards and all of our setback requirements. Density bonus concessions can be used as part of this project, but typically we just look at the objective standards and then look at the density bonus concessions in addition. So all of that, if the project meets all of that criteria, it'd be an administrative streamlined residential review, which is something we created through our objective design standards process, and a zoning clearance done at the staff level. This is it's all driven by the state, its criteria. There's not much to discuss, but we just wanted to bring it to your attention and to the community's attention. And as within your staff report, there's several cleanup amendments, which are listed here. We can go in detail. Since there are 32 here, we won't go into detail unless there's items that you specifically identify that you would like to discuss in further detail. But just to identify what we haven't discussed since, what was not discussed since in August 2024, we've updated a few items, which include the calculations and rounding, how we do that for minimum density calculations instead of just maximum density calculations. We edited a table to reflect new zoning district names, which we'll talk about briefly in the next few slides. We edited to clarify our minimum and maximum density section to comply with our established density ranges. We updated our inclusionary housing to add NMU zoning districts to that chapter, and then we added a new definition for demolition. And then we'll go through quickly a bunch of maps. These are zoning map amendments, and this is intended to just bring our current zoning map into consistency with the general plan. So we're not making any huge changes from what's already been adopted through our 2040 general plan, but I just wanted to bring it here, show it to you here quickly. If there's questions, we can always bring these up. If there's particular items you want to discuss in more detail, that's what this information is here for. So we're going to change the area along Northwood Boulevard and Donner Pass Road from CG to corridor mixed use. The area on the north side of Donner Pass Road on the east of Frady's and west of the MacIver roundabout, from general commercial to corridor mixed use, 6 to 18 dwelling units per acre. On the west side or the central side of Gateway, it'll move to CMU 12 to 24 dwelling units per acre, and that was specified within the 2040 general plan, that distinction between the densities. Along where Crossroads Center is on State Route 89 South, that'll change to corridor mixed use as well. At the Glenshire store area, that'll change to neighborhood mixed use. On the northwest side of Donner Pass of Donner Lake, there will be the commercial area will be changed to NMU. Along the eastern side of Donner Lake, on the north side, that area will change to NMU. And then the site behind PUD Meadow Park will be changed from PF to REC, and that's just to ensure consistency with the general plan. And then there's a minor cleanup item to change the boundaries of the downtown master plan, just for clarity. As I discussed, we're proposing new zoning district names, which is intended to bring us into consistency with our 2040 general plan and to be consistent with the naming conventions that are in the general plan. So it's all focused on the residential components within our and densities within the zoning. So we're changing single family to low density residential, and we'll be changing all of our densities from single numbers to ranges as shown in our general plan land use designations. So there's a bunch in multifamily residential, downtown residential zoning districts, and our DMU will be adding ranges for our density. There's also two items within our general plan, or we're proposing to update the 2040 general plan figure land use LU2, the land use diagram, and the roadway noise contours in our safety and noise element. This is intended to be non-substantive. This is just some errors we found when we went from the 2025 general plan to the 2040 general plan, and there are some changes. We're not increasing density, we're not decreasing density. It's just kind of technical errors that we need to update. So this is our existing land use diagram. We're proposing some changes. For instance, this one along Donner Lake, at the Donner Lake Village, we're proposing to change the land use designation from rural residential, 0.5 dwelling units per acre, to 1 dwelling unit per acre. We're just changing that to very low density residential, which is just a different name, and it has the same density range that was that is currently in the 2040 general plan. So similarly, we're also making changes to some items that were taken out with the 2040 general plan that were specifically zoned recently by the town council to be a specific zoning that may not have made sense to our consultants at the time, but makes sense to our community. So there's some minor changes like this one that we're changing this parcel to corridor mixed use, which is the one behind the Napa Auto Parts building. And then similarly, that'll happen with this one. This is something that we specifically looked at as a community and rezoned. And then this one's just a cleanup amendment along the Grace Crossing boundary. This is not the Grace Crossing specific plan area, so we're just removing that area from the boundaries of that PC2, Plan Community 2 for Grace Crossing area. Same thing here, just cleaning up some boundary lines. Changing the land use designation for town hall from industrial to commercial, and then cleaning up we removed the downtown visitor lodging zoning designation for the Coburn Crossing Spring Hill Suites project, and we're going to move the hotel to commercial and then move the apartments to residential. Additionally, as I noted, we're also proposing to update our noise contours exhibit in our general plan. Right now, we have an exhibit that shows all our roadway noise contours, shows 267, shows 89 north and south, Donner Pass Road, but it does not show 80, and 80 is probably one of our largest noise sources, so that was just an error that happened when the information was transferred from the consultants to the town. So we're proposing to add this new noise contour to our general plan. So at this point, staff's recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2024-13, taking the following actions, recommending approval to the Town Council of the following general plan implementation actions for the 2024 General Development Code amendments for mixed-use zoning districts, by right housing, and cleanup amendments, zoning map amendments, and general plan cleanup amendments, and then recommending the amendments be exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15061B3 and 15060 and sections 15060C2 and 15060C3 of Title 14 of the California Code of Regulations. And Laura and I are here for questions, and happy to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we want to open for public comment, or do we want to start deliberating now before that? How do we want to handle this?
I think that kind of depends on whether we have questions on the separate sort of issues we're looking at and whether you treat those one by one.
My plan was to go down the list. So the way the
You mean,
original...
like interject public comment between, is that what you're thinking?
Not necessarily. So I was going to go down the staff report in that order. So I think first was...
The definitions? Or the order?
No,
we
the
did
first
it?
thing that was on the was
Right house?
18, 14, and then by right, and then the cleanup is how I have it. But we can do cleanup first. It's
Why don't we hear public comment now?
kind of what I was thinking.
There's not a lot, you know.
And just get
so
that part of it out of the way.
Let's get the feedback
Yep.
from the public, and then we can put that into our conversation.
Is that okay? Then that's what we're going to do. We're going to open up item 7.1 to public comment. Please come up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. When you're done, fill out a comment form and hand it to Kaylee, who's over there on the right side. So opening public comment. Press the green button, state your name and your case.
Okay, I'm Jeannie McCarthy. I'm Rob McCarthy, and I own McCarthy Sign Company for 46 years. He's not here because he has health issues. So I'm taking over the head here. We purchased 13406 Donner Pass Road on East Donner Lake, and it's zoned CN in 2008. We're having a concern about the zoning CN because we live and work in it, and that's why we purchased the building, so we could live and work, and Rob could do the workshop. But since then, we've been kind of told that that workshop is kind of where Rob's not even supposed to be after 16 years, which is a little scary. So I'm suggesting you need to add some usage for entrepreneurship individuals who design signs, invest in one product, a makerspace and entrepreneur craftsman, which they make one product and that's all they do. They do not manufacture. They're artists. This town is full of artists, as you know. Most of them are working in their garages because they can't afford commercial. That's where we started. But that's why we're in this building, live and work. So when we purchased this building, we were told we could live and work and we were in the right zoning in 2008. But I have a potential buyer sitting over here, and he'd like to talk to you after me. That he went to the planning department. He's an entrepreneur individual who designs one entertainment console, which you put a record player and things in it, and he's going to build one at a time. He will not be manufacturing. He won't be doing delivery trucks, no employees. And he's the first potential buyer we've heard in 16 years tell us that we couldn't have this type of person in our building. Because we've had several people, we have contractors, artists, hobbyists, and we bought this building because the town of Truckee was promoting live and work and ride your bike to work. As a day of 16 years, nobody's ridden their bike to work, but we have everything for them. Donner Lake, just to bring that up, is not a friendly, walkable neighborhood. There are no sidewalks, and there never will be. Only bike paths used by bikers, electric bikes, pedestrians, walking dogs, and with families. It's dangerous for them to be walking down that Donner Pass Road. We only live and work in the building. We have overhead door down there, realtors, stick grocery store, and Donner Lake Kitchen, the pub, restaurant, ice cream store, Donner Lake Resort, a contractor building, and parking is a huge issue for all of us that have commercial buildings down at Donner Lake. During the summer, this past summer, it was a zoo down at Donner Lake. Those 5 public docks down there are causing traffic problems, and the West End
Thank
beaches
you.
haven't.
Thank you, Jeannie. Your 3 minutes are up.
Are you serious? I practice at home.
It's a clock. It's a timer.
You got a different timer than me? Anyway, I'd appreciate you look at my zoning and let us stay there and let the next person move in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
State your name, please.
Steve Morris, Streamline Hi-Fi. I started a business here about a year ago, got it off the ground, building high-end stereo consoles, handcrafted by me. I have no employees. I'm looking for a better spot to build my business. I am not a type of business that needs a lot of trucking or anything like that. It's all handcrafted, more on the art side of things. But yeah, looking to see if there's another way that these existing buildings specifically in this Donner Lake commercial neighborhood area could maybe see some different ways of doing things or allowing things, with a variance even or something like that for people like me who get kind of pigeonholed into manufacturing, even though that's not really what I'm doing. And so, yeah, just looking to see if there's a better way we could maybe get around some of these existing buildings. I understand the need and the want to control traffic through there and not make it, too dangerous for people with semis going down there. But that's not what I'm doing. So trying to look for different ways to do things over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next.
Hello, my name is Sohail Siddiqui. I am the owner of the Gateway Cottages property that is located on the north side of Donner Pass Road, east of Safeway Plaza. So I purchased this property about 7 years ago, and I've been working with the planning staff back and have been going back and forth with our original zoning, and we were then asked to wait until town comes up with a new plan or sort of general plan amendment, and they might give us more density. And when we talked about it, the timeline that was given to us was about 6 months to a year window. Now we are into 7th year, and we still don't have a clarity. Between that time frame, we have gone through multiple zoning discussions. Our zoning was increased all the way up to 30 units per acre. And then to our surprise, back in 2023 or 2022, it got reduced to up to 18 units per acre, which was a kind of a disappointment for us for waiting for that long and then just getting only that much density increase was just, for me, it was kind of misleading to us. I felt kind of betrayed by the way we were led on by the stuff. But anyhow, the things that have changed in my personal life, 3 months ago, I had my open heart surgery. I've been promising my family and children that I'll develop something, and part of the development will include something for them which they can come and enjoy. They have really given up on me. They think that I'm just bullshitting with them, pardon my language. But one of my son has moved on to Texas. He says, forget it. I'm not going to wait for you here. The other one is moving on somewhere else. So my point is, I am okay with the new suggestion, which is the corridor mixed use. The problem is still, we have been for over a year waiting for the development standards. We have been waiting for the town density bonus program that needed to be defined. There's nothing we can do until all of these things are clarified. My ask today is kindly lock this in once for all and give us a clarity that this is what you can do so we can submit. We're ready to go. We had submitted our design about over 2 years ago, and then we were told to wait till all of these things are finalized. Our plan is pretty much ready to go. And all we need to do is just make slight tweaks based on the new code that town is coming with, and we're ready to go. We want to start the construction as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dylan Crosby. I'm the Vice President of Facilities and Construction for Tall Forest Health System. I appreciate the opportunity for the health system to provide comments and public input on this section. We did submit a public comment with recommended changes and the commentary behind that to substantiate said changes. And I'd like to just broadly speak to our concerns with the code as written. Unfortunately, the code amendments as drafted, and I apologize, I haven't had the opportunity or seen before the meeting the staff changes, so I don't know those impacts yet. But what was proposed and published provides significant challenges to the health system to provide access to care for this community on a myriad of changes. As it relates to the corridor mixed use, there's significant challenges and a burden for the health system and hospital district to provide non-healthcare related services within future developments in that area. As it relates to housing, which is later in there, there's not the adequate code amendments to support housing within the public land designation use of public hospital and office, which the general plan does say housing is allowed. And in addition to that, as it relates to the commercial functions, neighborhood commercial and general commercial, by removing medical services, hospital out of those land use designations creates extreme impacts. And I'd like to provide an example. The state of California has mandated that all healthcare or hospitals provide 72 hours of storage for water and sewer waste. If you look in the public facility zoning designation by the hospital campus, there's very, very little square footage to provide that. And for a census scale, we're talking about 75,000 gallons of water to be used. By removing medical services, hospital, from commercial neighborhood and general commercial, which, by the way, under the public hospital office land use designation, there are 14 parcels owned by the hospital that are commercial and neighborhood commercial. That now creates a burden and essentially no space for us to be compliant with state mandates. So again, there's significant burdens as proposed. We would appreciate the commission's consideration of our proposed changes or further time to work and collaborate with staff to provide more refinements that don't place these burdens on the health system. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dylan. Any other public comment?
My name is Jerry Newland, and my family's owned a couple lots on the west end. And would it be too much to ask to put the map up, Laura, of the west end? Concerns with specifically which lots are being converted from commercial, neighborhood commercial to the neighborhood mixed use. And the visual, I think, will help with, and actually the other one where you've got redlined around the actual lots, there's a chunk of homes and lots that have never been commercial. And this came up 5 years ago when there was a proposed development that was in front of this commission. Thank you very much, by the way, Commission, for allowing for public comment. And there were dozens of property owners on the west end who wrote letters, and you could go back to those records to see, there we go, right there, perfect, thank you. All of the noise, safety, parking concerns with, and if I can, go just quickly over here. Is that all right? I approach that to show.
We won't be able to hear you speaking.
I'll talk loudly. So right here, we've got no commercial, never been. Originally it was designed to be commercial because there was Donner Haven Hotel in the 70s. So it's an artifact that you have this little appendage, which is truly that island right there, all homes and everything here homes. There's a pub on the corner and there's a road right there. And so the recommendation would be to just lop off those and not make them commercial, because it just doesn't make any sense. And I know I'm pressed for time here, but I would encourage you to go back to 3 different hearings where I made public comment here and brought all these letters from people who talked about the 100,000 people at the West End Beach that have no sidewalks, no crosswalks, no parking to be able to use those residential, purely residential lots for any type of commercial use. I get the concept. I love the concept that you have all of that other area where the condos are and the ice cream and all that for people to do their thing, but it's a big problem. And so we have one blank lot there, one home next to each other. We want to develop the blank lot and would fill it in and make it beautiful. It'll never get developed if it has to be something commercial or mixed use. So that's, I'll just be totally transparent, part of our thinking. So not just me though, again, lots of folks in this community who are full-time residents who don't want any commercial where you're trying to get 100,000 people to go across the street, which just the 20 years we've been there, we've seen lots of bad things happen as people are trying to cross the street. There's a cart there this summer and somebody almost got hit with the cart that parks in front of our house. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One more.
I came tonight just to get information, but when I saw the map of Donner Lake, I realized my properties are part of the proposal. So that just begged a few questions. I'm Paula Henriksen, by the way. I do live at the east end of Donner Lake. I wondered, I haven't been part of the process so far, Has there been a study done on things like property values? How much harder will it be to develop our properties, the ones that are affected, concerning the town of Truckee? And then to elaborate on what some other people have talked about, crowds, no sidewalks, no trash collection. We don't even have mail delivery on our street. So, there's just a lot of questions about the feasibility of commercial use in certain places. So those are my questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Zero, this is your big chance. I'm going to close public comment. Thank you. All right, so next I'm thinking we're going to be in for deliberation or staff questions and discussing, I guess, what we're going to handle first. So,
Mitch, we've heard most recently about the designations for neighborhood mixed use and corridor mixed use in the public comments. Maybe if we just bit that one off first, that would be the most timely, given what we just heard.
Is that okay with everybody else? All right, so with that then, Coral, questions for staff or?
Yes, I do, and this is a basic question. So what happens, zoning designation change? So there are legal non-conforming uses, I believe, if something's sitting there that's no longer matches the district. When it's, if and when a property sells, the new zoning designation would apply then? Is that how that works?
No, it's just so the legal nonconforming status remains until a project, whoever the owner may be, comes in and wants to make changes to their property. So if they're wanting to change a use, then definitely has to come into compliance with our new requirements. If it's a single-family home and that they're trying to modify a little bit, our code does allow for modifications for legal nonconforming single-family residential uses.
And then a vacant lot would be subject to all of the new requirements.
That's correct.
Thank you. Is there another question? Is there, I know I should have read it. Is there a definition? I should have read all the definitions in the code, all however many pages of them are. But is there a definition for what an art studio is in the code?
We do have a definition for a studio. I'm not sure if it's specifically art.
Because Table 210 lists that a permitted use in corridor mixed use and neighborhood mixed, all three mixed use areas as studios for art, dance, music, or photography, but does indeed excludes in corridor and neighborhood handcraft industries and small scale manufacturing.
Right.
And do we have a scale definition for what that is?
So each of those has a definition. Let's see.
I guess also since we're looking at definitions, there is like a makerspace craft. How does that differ from the studio art space?
Yeah, we have a whole makerspace section that talks about the difference between a craft makerspace versus a more industrial type of one. So we can pull that up.
And, why would we exclude a more craft size makerspace from corridor and neighborhood, but allow it in downtown? If the issues associated with those are things like traffic and infrastructure, it seems they would actually be easier to accommodate in corridor or neighborhood than they would in downtown. Because right now, handcraft industries and small-scale manufacturing and makerspaces in manufacturing require a conditional use permit, but are permitted in the DMU, but not in the other two mixed use.
So the studio definition for the studio and art and photography, that's intended to be for typically for classes, as opposed to the creation of art. I do believe that maker spaces may be the appropriate definition for this gentleman's business or handcraft industries. The definition for makerspace, we do have the craft makerspace versus the manufacturing makerspace in our makerspace section. And the craft makerspace involves uses such as arts and technology that do not have significant impacts on adjacent uses in terms of noise and odors. So I think typically like working on a computer or doing something that I guess would have no noise, where maybe furniture production even at a smaller scale, would have some potential noise. And then manufacturing makerspace would be maybe where that noise component comes in, where it involves uses which may have greater potential impacts on adjacent properties in terms of noise and odors. And the uses may include, but are not limited to, metal fabrication and welding, paper products, glass products, furniture and fixtures, stone and clay products, and textile and leather products.
Thank you. Thank you. That helps me understand this. It does not help me understand why those would not be permitted in a corridor mixed use area. Is the real difference here is because there are residential areas more likely to be increased residential units in CMU and NMU versus DMU? Because we do permit those things in DMU.
Yeah, a lot of what we did with the NMU is looking at what's allowed in the neighborhood commercial. So I'd have to pull up the table, the existing table, to see if that's current.
I mean, I will say just more.
It's not currently allowed.
Historical knowledge is that we didn't have handicraft industries or maker spaces as part of our development code for a long time. It really wasn't until sort of the roundhouse became a discussion. We had some inquiries from some potential businesses downtown that were interested in doing things like making jeans to fit. So like you could go and get a custom fit and they would make them in that space. And then we had Atelier, sort of, which is now Bespoke, where they were doing classes where they were kind of making stuff there too. So the code evolves. But I think what happened is that we were focused on downtown at the time because that's where the requests were. So when we made those changes, we were looking at sort of the synergy of downtown of being more of those unique businesses that were starting to have these mix of uses where they might have some retail, but then they also had, you know, more of this handicraft industry happening with it. We were really not getting those requests outside of downtown. So I think it's helpful to think of it in those terms too, just that it's not necessarily about traffic noise, those things. I think it was just partly the evolution of the code.
I'll just chime in quickly. What I will say also is we have a number of legacy home occupation permits that have been approved many, many years ago, sometimes back to the 80s and 90s. So for things like woodworking, furniture making, et cetera, at someone's home. And we do typically get complaints from those types of home occupations because the neighbors either object to odors or sounds or traffic volumes or whatnot. So I think what we're trying to do is balance recognizing that there will be additional residential uses happening in these mixed use corridors with what are the appropriate types of uses that we think work well in a mixed use environment, recognizing that there'll be more residences in those areas.
That was my question. That was my question on that part of it. If any of you had questions or clarifications
On
that.
NMU specifically?
Like on the uses with related to in specifically the type
I've
of
got
things
comments,
that
but I
Mr.
don't-
Morse was talking about. But I also wanted to talk about the hospital thing, but that we can.
Well, why don't we
just
stick with one at a time? So we'll just stick with NMU since that's what we started with. So that would be the Donna Lake. I got a bunch of stuff.
Can I just really quick? I see that just back to the makerspace in the table, in table 2.10, I see that it's a permitted use in all three, CMU, DMU, and NMU. The makerspace craft designation on page, let's see, PDF page 49 of the resolution,
Can we see the makerspace craft definition?
which is the one that doesn't allow noises or odors.
Yeah, give me a minute to pull it up.
PDF 49. So page, hold on, real page, let's see, 2-63 of our resolution.
Those are the definitions of the craft and manufacturing makerspace. Yeah.
Yeah, it's bunched with the service usage rather than manufacturing uses. Okay,
And I
thanks.
think that's because we distinguish between the more intensive manufacturing types of makerspaces from the craft. But I will say we spent a lot of time with this particular use trying to figure out where it fit. We had multiple conversations about this, and the code is pretty specific when it comes to woodworking and furniture making and fixtures, that those are considered more manufacturing types of uses.
That helps.
NMU comments?
Well, I'm just curious about this, significant impacts, if somebody's inside a garage or a shop that's insulated to, today's building standards, is that a significant impact for doing some projects in there? And it's more of a deliberation question, really, I think. It's a subjective term, so something we can talk about further.
I think this was worded this way because of the potential impacts, and we don't necessarily know how something is going to be insulated when someone comes in and wants to do a particular use. And so we had to differentiate between things that we thought would be lower impact versus more significant.
And the fact that we don't know, in my opinion, kind of creates a huge problem I have with the whole concept of NMU and trying to be. It's my impression that the purpose of NMU is to have neighborhood businesses that people could walk to. However, I don't see enough people living at Donner Lake to justify, nor the infrastructure exists to make that happen. We have Sticks Market at Donner Lake, and I couldn't imagine another market surviving which would fit into the NMU concept. Tahoe Donner's got 6,400 lots in one market. Donner Lake's got Sticks Market. I don't know how successful they are, but I couldn't see another one opening and actually making it work. So for me, I think NMU needs to be a lot more flexible so when situations like this come up, it can be made to work so we can get to yes instead of no. So if there's a concern about sound, then we have a full-on building department. Part of their approval process would be make sure that it's soundproof. There's all kinds of sheetrock and studs and all kinds of ways to make something soundproof so it doesn't affect the neighbors. The same with odors, smells, sounds coming out of buildings. It's 2024. We have the technology to really help eliminate these types of things and stop impacting the neighborhood without taking the private property rights away from the people that own their properties. I don't believe that, I know it's costly and I know it takes a lot of time, but there's a ton of APNs in this entire section that we're looking at of people that are being affected that don't know they're being affected. A classified ad in the Sierra Sun, who looks at classified ads in today's world? Nobody. That's an age-old concept that doesn't work, in my opinion. So I'm also confused on why just the east end of Donner Lake was an NMU and not the whole lake. Where did that come from, and why is that?
I mean, what we're trying to do is implement what the general plan already has in place. So, I mean, some of these questions were things that were discussed during the general plan process. We're just trying to figure out how to implement it.
It's hard for me to agree with any of it because it's so strict. It takes so many rights away, and it would create so much extra work for people to actually get to yes, the way this is written, for me.
It sounds to me like the clarifying question you might have for staff right now. I don't think we're deliberating.
Why?
I don't think we're deliberating yet, right? So I think that what we're looking at here is maybe help remind us of why those extra lots were included on the west end across from the beach, beyond the pub and the realty office Why were the ones that were just now strictly residential? If you could
And why is
remind
that
us
big
why they
section
were-
of Donner Pass
remind
Road
us
on
why
Donner
they
Lake?
were included on there in
So
that
the
grouping.
part that Coral's talking about, that was neighborhood commercial before, so those were already commercial. The parts on the north side of the road, that was something that was changed through the general plan. Danielle and Jenna might have more insight into what the thought process was behind that.
The parts on the north-south stretch were already neighborhood commercial? They're the ones that are residential?
Across from the beach.
Oh, I meant
Those
on
are
the
the ones-
west. I'm
yeah.
talking about the west side of the
Yeah,
road.
so the west side, what you're talking about, those lots that this gentleman owns?
they were talking about being
So the map that she
residential
showed,
now.
it shows that they were commercial, and it's my understanding as a Realtor that they were. Because there was a client years ago I had that wanted to put a house there, and they were going to put an office into the house so that they could satisfy the commercial part of it.
So all the owners of those properties are now under commercial zoning already? Any change would have to have been, would already have to move toward commercial? The mixed use is just a variation of commercial. I'm just trying to clarify. That's correct? They're all commercial now?
So what you're seeing here in the red,
No, I'm talking about the west end.
We're talking about this gentleman's, yep, there you
okay,
go.
so- little bump
what
out.
he's talking about are these properties here. Those were neighborhood commercial before, so we're not changing residential to commercial there. And I would say that the goal of the NMU isn't to make this more difficult. We're trying to figure out how to allow enough flexibility while still meeting what the intent of the council was when it adopted the general plan.
And what
So-
is the intent of the council?
Well, for neighborhood mixed use, it was really to create these neighborhood serving commercial uses, and, whether or not everyone agrees whether that's,
Well,
going
from
to
a-
be feasible, that is what's in place, so.
And I hear that, but being the capitalist that I am, it doesn't make sense from a business point of view to open up another market to compete against sticks, unless somebody thinks they can do it, and if they own the property and that's what they want to do, then have at it. But to be forced into it doesn't make any sense to me. So
doesn't
another
have to be a
question
store.
Coral, and the other question I have is, why is that middle section of Donner Pass Road not included? So if you're doing one side and the other, why did the people in the middle get relief, as far as I could tell?
Are you talking about this section?
No, from west, so in between this and that,
Oh,
there's
like
what is
over
that, 2
here, you
miles?
mean?
Yeah. So if you're trying to be neighborhood mixed use, why wouldn't the whole neighborhood get it? Why is it just little pieces of it?
So part of that was when council was looking at this, that we had discussions about nodes. So we talked about Donner Lake, we talked about Tahoe Donner Z Market area, we talked about Glenshire and that store area and the value of that. We even talked about it with Grace Crossing at one point in time too. So that's the direction that they landed on, was to have these sections which encompassed a lot of existing commercial businesses and had some expansion on the east end also. But we have had conversations with multiple property owners, particularly in this area, that are interested in doing mixed use. So we've done some preliminary applications already. They're not for markets, they're for other things. They're anything from office to office plus residential. We've had, retail store, lodging. We've had a lot of interest, and people are waiting to see what the development standards are before they move forward. But they are looking specifically at how they can serve the Donner Lake neighborhood, and they are looking at the ice cream shop, the pub, these sort of other examples that are out there of things that are working.
So how is a pub neighborhood? People drive to get to a pub. I've driven to get the ice cream. So I get the concept just doesn't make any sense to me. So the nodes concept, where does that come from? What is that? And then why those nodes specifically?
I mean, you're going back through the entire general plan update process. So that's something that was sort of fundamental to the initial approach to the general plan update, was looking at all of our land uses, our urban design, our character, everything. And so nodes is a pretty common planning approach when looking at things like neighborhood mixed use, because oftentimes you'll have something that serves that local neighborhood so that they're not having to go further for, whether it's services, office, whatever it is. So they wanted to promote that.
Chair, if I may.
Please.
I believe Coral had something she wanted to say, and then I've got a statement, a suggestion after that.
Coral?
I just wanted to be clear, are we deliberating now? Because I have comments, but because it sounds like we are, but I thought we were just asking clarifying questions, right? I'll respond to whichever one we're doing, right, Chair?
How about, since on the agenda it says clarifying questions first, so let's do that. Any clarifying questions on NMU specifically?
Yeah, why, so in the NMU area, why would we have a minimum commercial area?
So in NMU, mixed use is required under the designation, and requiring some amount of commercial seems like the clearest way to show what's required. And we thought that the 50% requirement in these areas, if the intent of the general plan is to create these neighborhoods serving commercial uses, made sense versus the 1/3 requirement in corridor mixed use, because there's already a lot of other commercial development in corridor mixed use.
So we're saying in this area that 50% of any given property has to be commercial.
That was the draft proposal. That's definitely something that's up for discussion.
Okay, I think we should discuss that, but that would be a deliberation.
But there would need to be some kind of mandatory requirement for a mixed use in that.
Says who?
Says the general plan.
Says the general plan. Okay. The hospital question. That's all the questions I have for NMU right now.
Sammy?
Are we just doing NMU or all the
Just
MUs?
NMU right now.
None for NMU.
Hold on a second, I'm looking. The staff report that's up now, that's the same one that has been there all along, right? That's up on the website?
Since this staff report packet was published.
Since it was published on Thursday
Yeah.
or Wednesday? Thank you. All right, so if there's no more clarifying questions, then let's go with deliberation. So Coral, how about it?
What?
You can go first, David.
Well, I just wanted to just take a step back and be aware of what some of our options are here tonight, Chair.
Yes.
And then if somebody doesn't like some of these suggestions, it's up to us to help navigate a direction forward that we think is more appropriate. And that would be our suggestion to council. So
Correct.
If we find things in here, like I particularly don't think that 50% commercial is an appropriate amount. I think that I understand now that the general plan has dictated that we need to have a minimum, but I think the market should dictate the minimum.
I agree. And does
so-
the general plan actually say that? What does the general plan actually say? Can we see it?
It says mixed use is required in neighborhood mixed use. So there needs to be some kind of mixed use.
But it doesn't say what the
Doesn't-
minimum has to be.
No, so that's what we're trying to come up with as a standard. And that's up for discussion, like I said.
Okay.
So,
So just to clarify, if there's not a clear standard, you could have someone come in and do 50 square feet and call it commercial. I mean,
that wouldn't bother me.
so just making that clear.
And we're really trying to make sure that the intent of what is in the general plan is what's being reflected in these standards.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, if you could keep it open for the possibility of only 50 square feet to carry on with that example of commercial, that's not achieving what the CMU designation is supposed to achieve.
NMU.
NMU.
I get that, and that's not lost on me. I just think that we should have the market should be able to dictate what is going to be the best for that neighborhood. Somebody that is going to actually has the money to come in and invest and start a business should be able to come in and look at a property and say, I only need 10%, 5%, 12%, 60%, whatever, to do my butcher, baker, cabinet maker, whatever. Like, that's my point.
Butchering
agree.
is the operative word here, I think, perhaps. I mean, so this is why we have zoning code, so that you can try to create something in an area that would be useful. Neighborhood mixed use is something I can ride my scooter to from where I live. My friends who live in the West End love that they can walk to the Donner Lake pub. They love that with a very short bike ride or a longer walk, they can get to the market that's on the lake. They don't have nearly the amenities that I could walk to. Now, I'm way up on the hill in Tahoe Donner, but think of all the things you can walk to downtown and how nice that is. I know that our friends who live downtown love that. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here. If there's just going to be another real estate office there, sorry.
None taken, but I mean, I think
this is private property we're talking
Yeah.
about. I mean,
Yeah,
we've
but the whole
taken the
point
rights
of this
from
is to
private-
incentivize the development that the town would like to see
This
in
isn't
these
incentivizing.
areas.
This is telling them what they have to do. This is not
Okay, fine.
incentivization.
Yes, it is telling them what they have to do to get what we want out of this neighborhood, right? And by we, I mean the collective town after passing the general plan. That was deciding what the town wanted and the vision for this area for the future, and now we're here to implement it. I agree, maybe 50% is too high, and that's the thing we can talk about, but without a minimum, it does not meet the intent of the general plan. And look, if you just look at this map, how many housing units exist that would be within a 15-minute walk or bike ride to commercial uses that they don't have access to now? That's awesome. In terms of just access to amenities, reducing VMT, carbon emissions, I mean, like, this is what we want to see, right? It provides benefits not only to people who live there full-time, visitors, which are a part of our community that we can't ignore. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We just need to look at how to make it work.
Here's a young entrepreneur that's being told he can't use his shop or his potential shop. How does that help the community?
Well,
I hear what you're saying loud and clear, Mitch, and I support what you're trying to do. And I think what we need to do is work together to make amendments to what's been presented to us so that we can give to council.
Right.
So let's take a look at, I for one, as you know, at this point, think that this minimum 50% should be much, much lower.
Like what?
10?
Sammy?
I mean, it's hard because I'm not an expert in this area, but I would say minimum 25%. Just thinking
So
about how big
arbitrary,
these
just
parcels
sitting
are.
here coming up with
10%
numbers.
is just as arbitrary as any other number, and it's ridiculously small, if you ask me. Imagine building, I don't think you can build a 5,000 square foot tilt up on one of these, but imagine if only 500 feet of that that's nothing.
So my point is that it should be up to the market to dictate how much space
And the
they
private
need.
property
Zoning
owner.
is
Yeah.
how we implement the general plan. Zoning is what our town has, what we have in this country.
So let's take a look at the things that we want to put our fingerprint on here. We know that the minimum commercial area is one of the things. I think we should take a closer look at what some of these allowable uses are, to help some of our, smaller. I mean, we've got how many one-off out of the back of the pickup truck contractor type of people live here in Truckee and make their living, servicing our housing and commercial industries. If they want to set up a little shop to do some light duty, setting up their plumbing fixtures, making some cabinetry, things like that, I think that we should figure out a way to make that achievable for them. I think that should be in this neighborhood mixed use. I agree.
I agree. I'm just sorry to interrupt, but I think we can add that in, maybe with a minor use permit or a conditional use permit. Like, there are ways for us to include that, but still have a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Discretion over it.
Okay, so
If a maker takes orders and sells product out of a small craft maker space, is it then commercial?
staff question?
I think that's a staff question.
So while staff looks at that, let's just quickly here, and I'm sorry to be not trying to take over your party here, Chair. What other things in this neighborhood mixed use do we want to take a closer look at and maybe make some amendments to it? We've got 2 items so far.
In NMU?
NMU, neighborhood mixed use. And then I have a follow-up question for staff. This may not be one you can answer quickly, but in this neighborhood mixed-use area, what is the largest lot and what is the allowable coverage?
The largest lot in NMU.
Yeah. I mean, if we're trying to figure out what is a minimum, if we're mandating that there's a minimum commercial space requirement, I'm just trying to get my arms around what is our biggest lot and what's the allowable coverage. And so what would 50% of that be? What would 10% of that be? You know, and just kind of just spitball some ideas of, there's businesses out there that are commercial spaces that don't necessarily require a lot of actual physical space. I mean, you could theoretically be, you know, a cell phone repair shop. You don't need, you know, a ton of space. You could maybe do that. And I'm just completely, it's a complete conjecture because I don't do that. But I mean, you know, you could have 100 of these in an office the size of a walk-in closet and make a decent living repairing that. And that could be a commercial space. And if you're saying that we need 50% of the allowable coverage of a lot, and let's say the lot is 10,000 square feet, you don't need 5,000 square feet to do that business. That's my point.
I think, so the 50% would be of the floor area of the business that's proposed. There's a 70% site coverage maximum in NMU and a 0.6 FAR maximum. Do you think that site is maybe, it's probably a few, maybe 3 acres?
It's 2 point, yeah, so there's a property that had a former project proposed on it that's 2.2 acres, that's right at the intersection of South Shore Drive, and it's 2.2 acres.
And what's the allowable coverage on that?
70% site coverage.
70% site coverage. So just big round numbers.
But the standard isn't site coverage, it's square footage.
I get it, but I'm just trying to have some reference point to talk about this. 2.5 acres, approximately 112,000 square feet, 70% of which is 78,000 square feet, right? And now we're saying that if you were to build a project maximizing the allowable coverage on that site, half of that, you'd have to have a 34,000 square foot commercial space. That is huge.
I feel
That's not correct.
That's not right.
No? Okay, then help me understand the numbers.
So it's based on the square footage of the building that they're proposing. It doesn't have anything related to the site coverage. So are they proposing a 10,000 square foot building? Are they proposing a 5,000 square foot building?
Well, if you have 78,000 square feet of coverage available,
That assumes that the entire site's usable too, and I think the site that Danielle's talking about.
I think you
also
guys get my
has
point though,
constraints.
right?
Yeah, but I think if you're going to have a conversation where you take those factors into consideration, the site coverage is not the standard that we're talking about. It's the size of the structure. So site coverage includes your parking, your.
I get it. But I'm just trying to make a point here that, you know, having this arbitrary number that is higher than, in my mind, 10%, I think is too much. So I think I made my
Why is 10%
point.
the right number? Help me understand that.
Well, I think I just made a pretty good example. I'm talking about, you know,
But
Mr.
that's not using the floor, that's not using the floor area as the example. And you can't even build a 30,000 square foot retail space in this town. So I need an example that's more realistic.
Okay, so
If
we're
gonna
using an
talk
example
about
of a
an
2.5 acre site that has 70,000 square feet, big round numbers, 70,000 square feet of coverage available. And let's say we need half of that for parking lots.
So again, if we're trying to be accurate, this particular site, you just asked for size. So yes, it's a larger property, but half of it has slopes over 30% that are not buildable. So if you're talking about what's actually buildable on the property, it's not the 2.2 acres.
Okay, so we'll take a smaller parcel. My point is, let's say, can we agree that there's a site that you can build a 7,000 square foot structure somewhere in this district?
Yeah.
You don't need 3,500 square feet to repair cell phones.
What if we don't want to repair cell phones?
That's not up to us.
There's many different kinds of commercial, retail, office, services that could be put in that space.
Coral, what's the number
Not
that you come up?
offices, sorry. I don't have a number. I am going to ask, though, what some common numbers might be for similar zoning codes in other municipalities.
And also, just to add, while staff is thinking about that, it's not only one commercial space. There could be multiple units of commercial. It doesn't have to be one 3,000 or 3,500 square foot space. It could be 3 1,000 square foot commercial
And
spaces.
we did this research with the general plan update. So we did look at multiple other codes. It is common to have 50% or a third. Those were the two most common calculations that we saw. We also did the same level of work when we did the Georgia Ranch specific plan. And not to say that there aren't other development standards that could be created instead of that 50% threshold. And I think if that's a discussion point that the commission's uncomfortable with, you could also provide us direction to go back and do additional research about what other methods jurisdictions are using to ensure that there's mixed use where it's not just a hard and fast 50%.
I like that.
I think it's. I don't mind asking for more. I want to be specific about a little bit more specific about what we're asking for. I think Danielle has offered a good suggestion there. The point is to incentivize mixed use, not to create a free-for-all of development. That's why we have a zoning. That's why we're choosing this as a neighborhood mixed-use area, so that it does provide a pedestrian-oriented, lively, neighborhood-focused area that can cut down on vehicle miles traveled and be a pleasant amenity for people that live there, not just what a developer wants to put there. We're trying to guide that area in certain ways.
Why are developers a bad people? Why do you say that like that?
I'm just saying
The developers are going to do,
Well, if they're all going to, have a free-for-all, then I don't know what we'll come up with.
I mean, that's not even what she said. And we also heard tonight that people are looking for direction, and we're here to give them direction so that they can move forward with their projects.
That's correct. Well,
I mean, I think we've offered, so if that's something the commission wants to consider as part of your, discussions, we could go back and look at some additional options and bring those back.
Personally, given the wide variety of things that are qualified as commercial, I think the 50% is not unreasonable. But I don't know who does. I haven't seen a calculation that shows what a project would look like, other than the one that we've already approved that you guys were here. That was that third commercial in that particular one? Sorry, I would probably be more helpful if I came up with the name of the project. The one near Rayleigh's.
We're not on in it.
That one was. I'm just comparing the percentage that was.
All right, so I want to start.
Required there.
Let's start wrangling this in. So, with all that being said, I like Danielle's suggestion of finding what other jurisdictions are doing. Although I'm concerned that it's just going to come back at 35 or 50% anyway, which is really.
It won't. We have other tools we can look at. I promise.
Okay. All right, so what else do we have for NMU? I get concerned that if we strangle everything that gets so regulated that it ends up removing the Truckee funk and everything is the same. It becomes a cookie cutter down Donner Pass Road at Donner Lake. So I just get super concerned about that as a regular rule.
I think the point of mixed use is so it's not a cookie cutter and that there's variety.
Well, if you regulate to death, then it becomes cookie cutter, because you can only do X amount of stuff and that's it. There's no flexibility.
So to that point, when we're talking about the allowed uses, like I said, a lot of what we proposed was consistent with the neighborhood commercial, because that was previously identified as the types of uses that were appropriate in close proximity to residential uses. So we do have options, like if you scroll down here in the makerspace section, it talks about accessory uses, where if you have a retail use, you can do a manufacturing makerspace. And as a regular accessory use, we allow uses that aren't otherwise allowed in that zoning. If it's, fits within that 25%, that's already a standard that's allowed in the code. So there are options to have some flexibility that are already built in, even if it's not in the use table as an allowed use.
So, Sammy, you had suggested there's other ways to get more uses into this area. So can we talk about some language about how we can have conditional use permits to allow for some of these things that we're prohibiting?
Sure. I mean, I'm just looking at the table 2-10, and it has a key about what is needed to allow each of these different uses in the different zoning districts. And they have, minor use permits, use permits. So they are things that require approval in order to go in. And then there are things that are just permitted, so can just go in without any.
Can we pull up 2-10, please?
But I mean, that's a good point that like accessory retail uses are already allowed in this table, which would open up space for if you're selling your goods out of your space, you could have flexibility to make your stuff there, your goods.
Yeah, and there are a lot of uses that are allowed either as permitted or conditionally allowed that are retail or service commercial. I mean, you can see all of them in the table here.
It's a pretty wide variety of uses, but we might want to consider whether there are any specific ones that aren't permitted or require excessive or more than just permitted. Consider whether we could, add some flexibility in there.
What is structural clay and pottery products? Why is that there?
We do have a definition. I mean, we could read it to you if you want. There's
No,
a lot of uses that we inherited from the county when we incorporated. So some of this stuff is kind of old, I will say.
I guess my question following up on that, and just for this part of the discussion, what's the process for doing a minor use or a use permit for something in this district that isn't just permitted? Like what would they have to go through? Like if there are some concerns with the particular use, would that allow, planning to put some additional conditions on those uses?
Yes, like with our home occupation permits, if it's a standard home occ, it's just something that's allowed at the staff level. If it's something that's more intense that needs a minor use permit, it has to go to the zoning administrator. And then some of those types of impacts can be addressed through the conditions. If something requires a use permit, it would come to the planning commission for approval. But within the home occupation section, it has specific criteria for things that need to be addressed to reduce the impacts on the neighbors. If we were to make some more manufacturing uses conditionally allowed in these zones, then we would probably want to think about how we would set that up to address those impacts. I'm not sure we necessarily know that right now, what that would look like.
So my notes have, in my opinion, the CMU should all be P. Everything in there. I don't, maybe not manufacturing, but the maker space, because that's usually smaller stuff. And again, with codes that require quiet and using today's technology to make it a neighborhood friendly or business that doesn't affect the neighbors. And that's completely possible.
I think that's why a lot of these are use permit, these uses that are allowed downtown is because...
That's downtown, but we're talking about CMU, NMU, I don't see...
Right, I'm just saying that if you were to want to allow some of those uses in these other zones, then that's probably why it's a use permit, is because acknowledging that there could be impacts that need to be addressed through conditions versus having something be just an outright permitted use.
Okay. So I would like to see mostly everything, in my notes, I have everything being a P or a UP, and in either one of CMU or NMU to give the property owner and the entrepreneur the decision, the flexibility to use that property in a way they feel fit that also doesn't affect the neighbors. I wouldn't want to be next to a wood shop myself. I get that. However, if I'm on a main street and know that there's going to be commercial, as long as they're insulated, it's quiet, they're not giving any sound, noise, smell, then have at it. That's how I see it. So I'd like to see, to finish this up, I'd like to see those go to UP. Anybody else up here?
I'd support that.
Sammy?
So for all of them, or just the ones in the manufacturing table part
Just
of the table?
Just the ones in the manufacturing table.
Okay.
Look, I keep trying to move it.
That's true.
Are you talking NMU or CMU?
Both. But we're talking NMU right now. So right now, NMU, I'll say the same thing for CMU.
I mean,
I mean, there's a reason you probably don't want a recycling facility. Well, neighborhood, it's not.
It's a neighborhood. Let's go with your concept. And you, Sammy, you want to be able to bring your
could put in the
recyclables to a
garba- in
local
the-
spot.
Yeah, I mean,
Why
that's,
is that? Why?
I would need to see the definition of food and beverage distribution, because that could be truck intensive.
Yeah, and I agree. We wouldn't want trucks going into
Printing and
something in
publishing,
residential.
again, that's a truck thing, but they're permitted in all three.
You could certainly cite those small recycling collection facilities in parking lots or in those areas.
Be great to have one just down the street.
Yeah, how convenient would that be?
Yeah, the only one I think I would object to is the food and beverage distribution.
I could go with that.
So as a real world example, DBI across the street is a food and beverage production. So they have,
Is that the Coors distributor?
yeah, lots of trucks, lots of.
Yeah, you wouldn't want
Yeah,
that.
there's the definition.
In the residential table in where were we? 2-10? The one up. Animal raising and keeping of household pets and backyard chickens. Well, I guess in CMU it's not allowed at all, but I'm keeping of household pets? And I thought it was a state law you have to allow backyard chickens.
I think keeping of household, isn't that, since we're talking about a corridor mixed use, isn't that like the pet lodge?
Is that what they mean by that? Keeping of household pets? That sounds like my dog or all the dogs I met downstairs earlier today.
We're talking about backyard chickens, so if you're including, if that's allowed in residential, any place that is residential other than probably downtown, you could probably do it. If you really want to have your AV area on a parking lot.
I saw it, so that's one of my notes. So
I can pull up the definition for that if you want. I think.
I can't, Jeannie. We're already close to public comment. I can't. I can't. Unless we ask you, we can't.
So so this definition for the animal raising and keeping, it includes household pets, also exotic and wild animals, birds and backyard chickens, livestock. So I think, I think this could be modified.
I'd appreciate that. Let's just separate exotic pets or a puppy mill from somebody having their pet in their backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the intent here wasn't to say people can't have household pets. It was to say you can't do all the, livestock and things like that.
Well, we do have dog breeders in town. So where is that? Should we not permit that in corridor mixed use?
I don't think dog breeders would be considered a household.
Yeah, I wouldn't. And I don't think they should be in.
I mean, I guess technically that's a home occupation, but if you have less than 4 dogs, we would never know about it. Because 4 dogs is the standard. Yeah, and you could have puppies, too. That's
2 standard Truckee residents times the required 2 dogs, and there you go.
So, Mitch, I can make a note that we'll
Thank
look
you.
at how we can tweak this so that we're not
And then
prohibiting people
I
from
just have a
having
question
household
mark
pets.
under retail nurseries. I don't remember what it is, but can we go to that one on 210? Should be the next one down.
Yeah, so the only retail nursery in the new corridor mixed use area is already there.
But it's not in NMU. So again, if there was a small shop that wanted to sell plants and flowers in the neighborhood, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I would.
I don't think that's a retail nursery.
That's
a
different.
store.
Yeah, that's just a retail store versus a nursery, which is a business that's basically propagating plants, borderline agriculture. Yeah.
Really, because Village Nursery doesn't propagate any of their plants. But that's a bigger example. That's not what I'm talking about.
And they're in a retail zone.
And then I have all the way down 18.14.050A4A. The word studio didn't make any sense to me. A4A, right there.
There's a reference to studio?
Yeah, restaurant and studio or retail and office, used
Oh, I
as
see what you're saying.
examples.
Yeah.
So the
What's a
studio
studio?
shows
Studio
up
could be
in
like a
the-
yoga studio, dance studio, art studio. They all fall under the same definition in the code. We're just trying to give examples of different types
Okay.
of uses.
Oh, I just thought of a residential, like a studio apartment.
Oh,
But I guess I
gotcha.
was just in New York, so that's how I was thinking.
Are the others of you feeling like we should include more permitted uses? And if so, do we just need to go down the list? Because I don't know if it's wholesale for me, but
I mean, I feel strongly that we need to come up with a real clear path. I mean, we do this, you know, we espouse all this outreach and try to get the public to participate, and we've got 2 members of the public right here, right now. I think I'd like to see a real clear path to see that project can have a way to be approved, but in regards to adding uses.
Let's get to yes.
Well, then I think, Coral, your suggestion makes the most sense,
Which is?
to go through the tables and see which ones we want to add to the different zoning districts.
it could be pretty fast.
Yeah,
Because
it
it
could
sounds
be
like
really
Mitch is going to
fast.
put a P in all of them, so we know that one.
Yeah,
There
or
you
at
go.
least a UP. In almost all of them. I'm not, oh, you know, small scale manufacturing, no. Handcraft industries, yes. Manufacturing, no. Makerspace, yes. Assuming there are codes around it that, again, make sure that there's no sound, vibrations, odors, et cetera, emitting from the process.
You know, as we've discussed, I think in any of those besides beverage production and food production, possibly, I mean, printing and publishing are already allowed. But that's,
And I
I
think
know where that one's coming from. So, but I could go with permitting all of those except the beverage production and food production.
I'm good with that. And can we remove structural clay? Since nobody knows what it is.
Well, that sounds like a brickyard. That's not something you want in your neighborhood, I assure you.
Okay.
There is a definition.
does sound
for
like a
it that we
brickyard.
can
All
pull
right,
up.
brickyard. I'm thinking, never mind. All right. CMU? And then how come section 1814 doesn't start off with a definition of mixed use, staff? I was kind of curious about that.
I'm sorry, just to circle back to what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
Did you have specific recommendations, or do you want us to go back and look at the use tables, come up with some other options and bring that back to you?
No, I think Coral had summed up what we were thinking. So which ones?
Except for beverage production and food production, and I have a hesitation about printing and publishing, but it's already there, so I'll leave it. But except for beverage production and food production, I would permit these in all 3 mixed-use areas, but I would welcome some input on what kind of a permit, whether it's UP or P, minor use permit.
So what we could do is go through, so we have a master use table that has all of the uses in all the different zoning districts, and we could come up with use permit versus minor use permit based on what we have in the other zoning districts for those uses, if that'd be helpful. Probably not on the fly, but we could either bring it back, or we could do that before it goes to council.
So I've got a question.
Hold on. So,
Okay.
let's just finish with Laura. So I would say if you could bring it back before council, it'd be amazing. That would really be the way to go.
And then have us
I'm
comment
thinking-
on it? Is that what you mean?
If that's,
Yeah.
if that's your preference, we could do that. And then we could also try to figure out how we would build in some ability to address the impacts if it is adjacent to a residence. We might need to add some new code language, a new section or something for these types of,
I think that's awesome. I think that,
I think then we could consider, you know, where the outliers are that could create problems that aren't controllable, but still provide property owners with a flexibility to have enthusiasm about developing.
and would that be CMU and NMU? Commissioners, yes?
Yes,
Yes.
that sounds like a nice Approach this, I know
Section
it delays it.
1814 doesn't start off with a definition of mixed use. I thought that was kind of odd. Shouldn't it be there so people know what it is when they're looking at it? Just, I don't remember what page it is. It was just at the beginning of section 1814.
Oh, at the
Packet
beginning of the
page
chapter.
140.
It's in a different part of the chapter, I think in the introductory.
Really, wouldn't it make more sense if I was looking at mixed use that it's right there in front of me?
You're looking at the development standards section, though, under that, where for consistency with how the code is laid out, we have the generalizations about the districts in the beginning. So like the descriptor of what that is.
Okay. All right. CMU, are we done with NMU, folks, commissioners?
Well, so to recap, staff is going to get back to us with information from other resources on what other areas are doing in regards to minimum commercial area, right? Because I don't think we're going to be able to get to consensus here. Yeah. And then can somebody help summarize where we're at with these allowable uses?
On table 210, staff's going to take a look at that, look at their master table, and come back with us with suggestions for what could be permitted or what kind of a permit we would need if the use were to be permitted in those areas. And I hope also suggestions to flag some of the uses that might not be appropriate. Just since we're looking at going, let's see how we can permit all of them, then tell us which ones don't make sense to do that as well. They're going to bring that back to us before it goes to council.
And then any other language around how to protect adjacent uses or adjacent residential.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome. And probably the same things with CMU.
Yeah, sorry, I meant that to be inclusive of CMU, unless we have some other topics.
There's also some topic with CMU, but those are for
But for the
both.
permitted uses, we've covered
Yeah.
CMU.
And are we done with NMU beyond this? Do we want to talk about specific properties? Does staff coming back with uses help McCarthy?
Well, one thing we didn't ask staff was what has occurred with this particular property and discussions with the planning department to date regarding what might be permitted in that property or what might be required.
So under the current neighborhood commercial zoning, there's really not any manufacturing uses allowed. And it doesn't meet the criteria for an accessory use based on the size of the workshop versus the rest of the space. So it would have to be a use that's allowed in that zoning. So it would be the same thing with CMU, depending on what the uses that are allowed are. But we could also look at, we did look at a lot of different definitions, and it does seem like it is more of a manufacturing use based on how it's defined, but maybe there's a tweak to some kind of definition that
I would disagree.
it easier.
I would disagree. He's not manufacturing. There's machines creating.
Well, I'm just saying that the definition, how these uses are defined and where they fall in the use tables, it's all already in the code.
Right, so it's most closely follows furniture and fixtures manufacturing use if you read the definition of that. And that's based on the information we were given when the question was asked. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be a different project description that we're not aware of.
That, of course, would be up to the applicant to present it in a manner that would fit a definition that would be appropriate for that lot.
Okay. I think we've covered that to death. All right, CMU. So my first question is Mr. Siddiqui's property, actually. And he said something about his density went up and then down and up and down. Is that correct? Because I had the same notes. I thought it was lowered now.
No, that's not correct. There were a number of different, I would say, concepts discussed throughout the 5.5 years of the general plan process. At one point, there were lower densities. At one point, there were higher densities. And ultimately, the decision that the council made was for, I think it's the 12 to 18 units per acre.
It is. No, whoop. Can't.
The council at one point contemplated a higher use, but where they ultimately landed was at the 12 to 18.
And what is it now?
12 to 18.
So it would be the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there could be,
It's corridor mixed use. The residential density is correct.
Right.
Sorry, 6 to 18. My apologies. It's a wider range.
6 to 18,
Yeah.
but 18 is his max.
unless he wants to go with state bonus densities.
That's his
Correct.
business, right? Okay. I had a bunch of grammatical corrections I'm going to leave away. Mobile park conversion. I'm super confused or concerned about that one. So it says something about if it removes the value of all units that are considered affordable, they have to replace those units. Isn't every unit in a mobile home park affordable? Is there a definition of affordable within a mobile home park? Is there some that are affordable and some that aren't?
There's just a general definition of affordable, based on income and.
Well, my concern is killing off the value of a mobile home. So if a mobile home park has an intense density that's above what they're going to be allowed under a CMU, you're pretty much removing the value of the incentivification for that property owner to take care of that property because it's no longer worth anything. So I'm concerned about that verbiage specifically.
So this language is just kind of a cut and paste from a different area of our code, just bringing it over to this new section. It's also reflects state law, which doesn't allow us to remove mobile home park units without finding a one-to-one replacement or rehousing them in that same unit.
For every unit that's in there?
Yes,
And that's a state law?
I believe so. And we
Can I see that?
We can look it up for you.
That would be helpful, thank you. I've got, it's 1814030C. And then, and this is, the hospital had the same question, why is medical services hospital removed from table 2.7, section 1812?
So just to be clear, there's a lot of medical services that are still allowed
I
throughout
saw that.
the zone. The hospital facility use, our understanding from the council is that what they wanted to see was hospital uses within the hospital campus, and that developed comprehensively with a master plan. Since master plan's not happening anymore, there would need to be some other process to look at that. But in the CN and CG zones, there's very few parcels in town that still have that zoning after all these changes with the general plan. So building a hospital in, Tahoe Donner or the Rock doesn't, to us make sense. So
Well, I'm just specifically concerned about it in the CMU, since that's what you were trying to zone them as. So,
Right.
and MAP ended up saying exactly what I was thinking. If we're talking greenhouse gases and VMTs, we have a growing hospital, and I don't know what their numbers are, but I know that they're seeing massively more patients than they were 5 short years ago, and expect that to continue to grow. And the town even mentions that in their comments to Placer County about Palisades, knowing that there's going to be more medical need. I, for one, don't think it's smart for us to have a medical campus that's been pinched in size, and then they're buying up other properties, so we have to travel all over the place. So we're actually adding VMTs and adding GHG instead of allowing them to expand within the property they already own, which is what they were planning on doing. So I'm super concerned about that. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. I think the hospital district should stay where it is. So they shouldn't have to go to buy Rite Aid or take over the office across the street.
So those uses are not actually the hospital definition. Those are outpatient offices and things like that, which are allowed in that zone. So
Okay.
we don't have a way to say they can only be within their hospital campus unless we don't allow those types of uses anywhere else in town, which that does not seem to be the direction anyone wants to go. So the idea with the hospital campus is that's where the actual hospital facility is for inpatient care, emergency room, things like that, surgery, whatever, are within that campus area. And then you could have additional services elsewhere.
So there
But-
are other clinic-type areas that have emergency services that aren't hospitals. You just put it into the hospital category. So if there was another emergency, urgent care type place that Ches had,
I
would
think
this?
urgent care is different than the emergency room at the hospital facility. Those are. So there is obviously a bigger discussion that needs to happen with this that would have happened through the master plan if it had moved forward, but it hasn't. So it's not something that we're proposing to figure all of this out right now. What we're trying to do is just figure out what makes sense for the rest of the CMU zone, and building additional traditional hospital facilities outside the hospital campus didn't seem to make sense. But again, that's.
Well, and that's a matter of
something
opinion.
that-
So across the street, is that outside the campus? I don't think it is. There's medical
It is
buildings.
outside the campus as defined in the general plan. So if you want to consider changing that, that's definitely something you could recommend to the council.
Commissioners, Sammy, let's start
But
with you.
ultimately, the council's going to have to provide us the staff direction on how they want to address the issues that the hospital has raised, because that wasn't the directive in the general plan.
So I think there was a wrench got thrown in the works when we were working on the general plan, there was talk of a master plan for the hospital campus. And so I think that informed some of the direction of the general plan. Now that that has clearly changed, commissioners, I think that we should direct staff to tell council that we would like them to go sit down with the hospital and rehash some of this stuff until we can get something that everybody can agree upon.
Would we suggest to them to have their process have public input? Because some people care whether or not where the new hospital facilities might be built. I mean, it's my understanding that a lot of the things that are off campus right now fit into the service office category as we think about it from a zoning standpoint, so they'd be permitted in a lot of different places. I mean, I guess my point is that people would care. Should we suggest to them, if we're going to suggest that they go through some process, we require some stakeholder participation and public participation?
I mean, what we're asking for then is a master plan. Is there any hope of that being resurrected anytime?
The master plan itself was initially initiated by the hospital district, so that would certainly be a question for them. I think if, what I'm hearing your interest being is the town taking over really creation of a zone district for a hospital campus. And that would be an extensive amount of work that the council, and a new land use designation. And that would have to be at council's direction. That would be an amendment to our work program and probably a multi-year effort, just given the complexities of the size of the campus and all the different areas that would need to be addressed. And not to say it couldn't happen, but that would have to be at council's direction.
So, and I completely comprehend that. I get it, because that would be a huge undertaking. So with that being said, how do we not pinch them immediately while that process continues on into the future?
I mean, I think you could certainly leave everything as is. What you heard from the representatives from the hospital district is they have concern over us taking out the medical services / hospital use in CMU. So you could add that back in and just leave it for now. We didn't
Which is
make
what I
any
said.
other changes with respect to clinics, laboratories, or extended care. Those are all remaining as is. So it's really just the hospital campus building itself that we felt
Yeah, that
wasn't
would-
appropriate for the commercial
That's what
mixed use.
That's what I started with. Why was it removed? So
Okay,
if
so
we
let's
could
add
put
it back in.
And then one other question. So whenever they redevelop or undertake significant renovations to the parcels that they own in the CMU, they have to add a residential component?
Only if they were to meet the trigger.
Okay, okay.
But mixed use would be required, so we would be looking at a variety of different uses, not just a mandate for housing at a smaller scale.
Right, so if they don't meet that 10,000 square foot threshold, they would be exempt from adding housing, but would have to add additional commercial uses to this. Okay, got it.
But we haven't talked about that one yet.
Right, and mixed use isn't necessarily residential.
All right. So, any other questions, comments about CMU from any commissioners?
Well, we do have this open topic still, a question that was asked to us about the 10,000-foot trigger.
I mean, that's certainly up for discussion as well. If the commission is uncomfortable with that, or a mandate to have a percentage of commercial uses versus residential, I mean, that's all up for discussion, just like we had in NMU.
I like that there be some kind of threshold above which you are required to provide residential. It's just it can be part of our approach to provide housing. So I'm okay with it. You could make it smaller, but I'm okay with it as written at least.
Sir?
I didn't hear any pushback on that one. So, fine with me.
Tammy?
Yeah, I'm fine with how it's written.
And there you have it. So we're good with the 10,000 as a trigger?
Unless we can make it 2,500.
I can't support that.
10,000's okay.
Any other CMU or NMU concerns?
Did you want to know the California code section for the mobile home park?
Yes.
So it's 65863.7, and it talks about prior to conversion of a mobile home park to another use, that they have to basically file a report with the state that identifies that there's adequate mitigation for in a replacement plan for those mobile home units.
Could you email me a link for that so I can check it out later?
Sure.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, for Mr. Siddiqui, his zoning is 6 to 18, was that what it was? 6 to 18 units per acre. Right.
And I don't see that changing. You're at 18 max now. I don't see it changing, going under that. So I think you can continue on.
And for the use table update, is this where you wanted us to add the hospital medical services in?
Where was it
just in
removed?
CMU? Well, this is a new table. I don't know why the track changes didn't show here, but this is a
Yeah,
whole-
because I have it down in section 210 is where it was, so table 210.
So you want us to just add it in for CMU?
Yeah,
Okay.
please. And again, the modus of notification for all the property owners that get affected by CMU, NMU, and all these other changes is pretty much a postcard and classified in the paper, which is the minimum that has to be done by law, I'm assuming.
There was the whole general plan public involvement process that went for years.
During COVID.
Started in 2018 and ended up in 2023. So COVID was part of it, but a lot of it was outside of whatever you could consider COVID. And we did extensive outreach during that 5.5-year window. And then Yumi has sent multiple postcards directly to people's mailed addresses, along with website postings, other outreach, and then the very exciting classified ads in the Sierra Sun.
I think the state needs to come up with a better method. Classifieds are 100 years old. All right, next. Are we ready to move on to by right? Yes, yes.
Did we discuss all the things that you requested us to for the mixed use thing?
That's a
Or
good
did
question.
anything
Thank you,
come up?
Coral.
I think so. We talked about the mix of uses, the commercial requirement, the residential component. Those are the three discussion topics.
Okay.
I think the next topic was the by right housing.
Yep, that's what I got. So by right housing only affects five properties and 4 owners. Has there been more specific outreach to them since that's a major changes?
Well, one of them was just approved last
And-
month.
Well, staff,
We sent letters to them directly and emails, since we did have email contacts for each of them.
and any response?
No. Yeah, no, except for the hospital who owns Upper MacGyver.
Why were these 5 properties singled out?
They were singled out because the state required that if there were housing sites that were identified in 2 previous housing elements from the 2019 housing element, then we were required to identify them for by right housing. So because these were in the last, including this year, 3 editions of our housing element, they want to try to push for more housing on these locations that were not yet developed for housing.
So state mandate says that the town can come in and rezone their property whether they like it or not.
That's
Is
correct.
that pretty much what I heard?
The zoning for these parcels, this is basically an overlay on what's allowed currently. They are still allowed to go forward with whatever they want under their base zoning. And all of them allow for at least 15 dwelling units per acre for the project site. So it's just adding another layer if instead of going down the pathway of doing a mixed-use project in the Arnold property, they want to do a standalone single residential project. They have a pathway to get a ministerial staff level review.
Which would be the regular path, the regular process.
No, it
It's
gives them the
more
opportunity of a
streamlined
streamlined
process.
review.
Or the
in
streamline.
addition, yeah.
So isn't by right and streamline pretty much the same thing?
In this instance, yes. In other instances, it could be that the use itself is just allowed, and that there is a process that we would have to go through to review to ensure that it meets our requirements and conditions can be applied. But for this instance, yes, streamlined and by right are the same. And to be honest, this by right housing isn't, I mean, with state density bonus laws in place now, it doesn't really provide an added layer. I mean, it provides another layer, but it's pretty consistent with what the density bonus law already allows.
So if they were, so just so I'm clear, so as defined here, these parcels could move forward with the project that meets all of our objective design standards, all these requirements at a ministerial review wouldn't come to us. If they were to utilize the state density bonus law and ask for the concessions or exemptions, would that make them still in compliance with the by right? Okay, so it still wouldn't come to us?
That's correct.
Coral, you had a comment. I think I cut you off. So in my notes, 18.217.030 A3 has something about 20% smaller. I don't remember what it is. Oh, 30. A3. The living area for the affordable housing units may only be up to 20% smaller than the average living area of all the market rate units. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. Why?
We need an objective standard to what similar is to the market rate. So we created that, and that's actually language that's directly from our inclusionary housing ordinance.
So is that something that they could ask for a concession if they were allowed to do so?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and all my notes say it's just comparing it to objective standards. It's kind of the same. Okay. That's it for me from by right. Anybody else? Nope. Is that enough for staff? All right, folks, cleanup. It was 32 things. Do we want to take a break for 5 minutes? I've got
I'm not
notes on
sure
a bunch of them.
Okay.
Like substantive or like cleanup notes, like edits and like grammatical issues? What kind of?
I submitted.
Well, I
those
had things
already.
like, so on the number one is zoning districts. Why is a medium density residential listed under low density residential and high is in medium? And that doesn't make any sense to me. So if we go to the chart that goes along with that in the zoning districts,
Table 2-1.
I don't remember. I'm assuming so. Yep. So RL has very low density, medium density. How could that be? I don't understand that.
Low density incorporates a range of
Yeah, but it
units per
has
acre, and it's lower than all the medium ones. But medium does show up in both sections.
yeah. And high density shows up in both RM and RH.
We could take a look at this again.
Okay.
At kind of in the middle of the process, we changed our mind in how we wanted to name these. We went from single family to low density and multifamily to.
So it's
medium
just a
density.
clerical thing is what it sounds like?
Yes.
That's
Medium
why it's
density
confusing.
residential does allow for single family, so that's why it was originally in that section. So we can look at that again and see if this
Thank
still
you.
makes sense.
Number 3. Purposes of residential zoning, section 1808020. So were the minimum builds added to all the zones? Is that what's going on here? So instead of going from 0 to 12, and now it has to be 6 to 12 or whatever, is that the purpose of this?
The ranges were built into the titles now. We've always had a 50% minimum density requirement.
So you're just spelling it out, but it
Yes.
always was there?
Yes.
On A, can we go to 1808020A? This is what I was doing all morning.
Was it 08020?
1808020. So, road residential, 10 acres per dwelling. My notes here say, why reduce from 5 acres to 1 acre? So you crossed out, you changed it right there.
Was the purpose of that for clustering a little bit, or?
I think that was to acknowledge that a lot of our rural residential parcels could be smaller than 5 acres, like we have.
They currently are. So like along
Yeah.
Glenshire Drive, they're less than 5 acres. We have some out in Pannonia Ranchos that are smaller than 5 acres.
So we just said
Okay.
at least 1 acre.
Just to make a more accurate description.
Perfect. B, I think there's a typo in here in B. It says 1 dwelling per 2 acres and then 1 dwelling per 2 acres and then 6 per 0 acre. And I think it should also say 2, or they should be consistent. Let me see where it is. So, right at the top there, in blue, 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres, yeah, right there, to 6 dwellings per acre. So the beginning of the sentence says 2 acres, and the end of the sentence just says acre.
Well, it would be more understandable if they were both expressed in the same per
That's my
acre
point.
unit.
That's my point.
Except it looks odd if we say a half a unit per 1 acre.
Yeah, we can,
We'll fix it.
clarify that.
Okay. Some of this clerical stuff, should I just send to you on the side so we don't have to go through this all night?
Yeah, if it's just minor stuff, we can just clean it up.
Number 6, 1812-020, why was residential removed on A, B, and D?
Do you mean standalone residential?
Yeah, but never mind. That answered the question.
Okay.
I got Wyeth Hospital removed on number 7, which is 1812-030, but I think we talked about that already. When was the Hilltop Master Plan adopted? I didn't know that it was.
2008.
Oh, so that's just the existing one that nobody's really adhering to. Okay. Well, so in number 22, screening and buffers, nowhere in our code do you bring up being consistent with fire department landscaping. It never brings up the fire department at all, and it really, really should. To do the public right, it should.
So we did make an edit to our landscaping section to talk about the zone 0. It wasn't totally, I think, what the fire district, after looking at it, they might want to tweak it, but
Well, the state's coming down harder and harder and harder on combustibles by structures in general, and I think people that are planning on landscaping should really be aware that it needs to be fire safe, and it doesn't mention it anywhere.
We're working on a process with Truckee Fire right now to
So
look at.
can we incorporate that?
Even as a cross-reference?
Yeah,
Not yet. There.
or
we
mention
added
it
this-
then, Danielle?
We
even-
added the zone 0 as an immediate fix, but it's a whole other discussion because it's the entire landscaping section. It's things like screening and buffering. It's more comprehensive than what we have able to do right now as part of this. But there will be a separate ordinance presented at some point that Truckee Fire has been working on.
So Danielle, we can't add the word fire safe in front of landscaping?
No, not at this point, because it's not part of this part of the work program for us. But it is in a future work program task for us to do. And we are working with projects on an individual basis. So it's just a separate process.
So I guess this will just have to be flagged for another, this particular language will have to be updated to reflect the new ordinance once it's adopted.
Along with, like I said,
A bunch of other things.
other stuff. It could
Yeah.
be, development standards, it's, landscaping. So it's not a simple fix. The simple fix that we added was the zone 0.
On number 28, I couldn't find wireless community facilities, 1858.
I think in a previous meeting, we decided to leave that all to the consultants.
It's
Sorry.
here, and
We
I
just
couldn't
said
find
that.
it, I couldn't cross-reference it, so. Or industrial housing either. Not sure how important that is right now, but I couldn't review it because I couldn't find it.
Is that the one we saw earlier?
That's what Coral's saying.
Yeah, I remember
I
seeing
think-
that, but yeah, it's not
I think I
listed
just
here.
PDF'd this one page, which had the zone district changes, so it wasn't the full.
Okay,
Yeah, so it doesn't have the title on the page.
got it.
It was a pretty minor edit, though.
Definitions. Under FAR, it talks about measuring all the inside walls count, and it goes from exterior wall to exterior wall, but it doesn't specify is the outside of the exterior wall, the inside of the exterior wall. And I only bring that up because historically, the Contract Association had issues with that years ago, and I want to make sure it's clear. Probably from the inside, but I've always looked from the outside.
Usually
It should be
exterior means-
stated. I don't care. It just should be stated.
I agree, it should be stated. I mean, usually I would read that and assume it's exterior, but I could see why people would want it to be the
Well, if
interior.
they're down to a foot on their FAR, they're going to want to know, so it needs to be specific.
Yeah,
So exterior of exterior wall, I believe is how the building division measures it.
And I
that's,
think that's
when we changed this a while back, it was to be consistent with how they're doing it, so we don't have two different calculations.
Right, so, and I think that makes sense, but I think it should state that. It's exterior of the exterior wall to the exterior of the exterior
So
wall.
measured from the exterior of the exterior wall?
Right,
Okay, we can make that edit.
thank you. All right, that's all I got. There's not that much more to take a break, Dave. Zoning map amendments. Does staff have anything else in that section, the cleanup section that you wanted to discuss? Anybody, any other commissioners?
No, I had minor, wording changes or
Me
grammatical
too.
stuff. I just submitted those, and they're the usual kind of thing I have, so.
All right. Because I'll email whatever other grammatical things I have. So zoning map amendments. So, anybody, any comments? Coral? Dave?
No, I didn't have any problems with the maps.
And I see
Just
Sammy
getting back
shaking
to
her
those-
head in the
I'm just getting
negative.
back to those maps.
I just have it's affecting a lot of properties, and I'm just afraid that they don't know, and they're going to come into the counter screaming when they want to do something.
I think it's possible that people will not be aware that the zoning change is being made, but I also think that there were a multitude of opportunities and outreach that covered this potentiality.
In
And
today's world, if you don't.
I know, and I feel for somebody that's trying to work in that, and if they were not informed or did not seek that information, I understand that could be a very difficult situation, but the general plan update was pretty open.
But for the average person that's working their daily job and comes home from work and feeds their kids and goes to sleep and wakes up and goes to work the next day, is not looking at classified ads, postcards, or that there's a general plan update going on.
So I would look
But
at
I-
postcard to see that they, for the average person, they might not care as much about planning until it affects them.
Right, that's my point.
I mean, Mitch, I could agree with you that
I know,
there
but
could be, a modernization of the
But that's a state thing.
dissemination of information process, but that's nothing we can do about.
General plan cleanup amendments, as we've got here, I have nothing. Got a couple more. I got some more grammatical stuff, and that's it.
Do you want Laura to go over the changes that we've heard so far?
Yeah, I have one more question about a zoning map amendment. So the factory outlets, whatever they're called now, Truckee West, under the new zoning, would the escape room have been allowed? Out of curiosity?
Yes,
It would have been under the new zoning?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if somebody wants to do a new storefront in the factory outlets, they have to come up with residential now, or how does that work?
No, there's the trigger that we're proposing with the 10,000 square foot, if they add 10,000 square feet in addition, then that's when it triggers the residential. Right
Right.
now, it meets the mixed use component of the requirements.
The only other thing I'm going to bring up, but it's not, it's a council issue, is cannabis and having cannabis stores instead of delivery services. We constantly talk about VMT and GHG, and a cannabis delivery is exactly that, VMT and GHG. Instead of people going to one spot, they're driving all over.
But they're staying in their
services.
home and the cannabis is coming to them. And instead of them driving, maybe, you know.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
think it's
All
a
right, never
wash.
mind. I'll leave that alone then. All right. Yes, please review for us. You like that?
Okay. I think I got this. Okay, so we were going to fix the animal raising and keeping an NMU to make sure that household pets aren't being prohibited. We're going to look at the allowed use tables in 2-10 to look at adding all of the uses with the exception of beverage and food
Beverage distribution.
distribution. I wrote production, but yeah, distribution, and see if those all make sense and what permit requirements we would recommend for those. Come up with some language to address the potential conflicts that the more intensive manufacturing uses could create with adjacent residential uses. Look at other options to create standards for mixed use rather than the minimum percentage of common commercial space. Sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. And CMU.
It's not that late, right? It's only 7:30.
Just my scribbles. And then CMU, we're going to add the hospital use in the CMU tables. There were no changes to the by right housing for cleanups. We're going to check on the medium density in the low and medium table 2-1. And also update the language to say 1 to 2 and 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre in 1808-030B. And then clarify that the FAR definition would be the exterior of the exterior wall.
Which one of those bullet points gives us a clear path on how to allow our little manufacturing friend in the McCarthy building?
That would be the allowed use tables
Okay.
with language about how to address potential impacts.
Lovely.
They would not, yeah, that's our next step. It's not a resolution yet, but it's our next step.
That may need to be a separate section with development standards in a section of our code, because these are just tables, and the ways that you address impacts are through development standards. So we might need to brainstorm what that would look like, and further distinguishing between, what our code does right now is distinguishing between manufacturing. So the structural clay is actually brick manufacturing, that you were correct.
Did you look it up?
I did. And
Thank you. Thank you.
And really what that gentleman is considered today, which is a manufacturing of a furniture product and cabinets, versus sort of an artisanal craft maker space. There's very clear distinctions in our multiple definitions of that. So I think what we need to do is better understand how he operates and if he falls in a manufacturing category versus something that's different.
I think he's more of an artisan and made a mistake when he first submitted to you guys, but that's up to him to
Sure.
figure out.
But you understand our goal. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think, anything else? Coral's whole smiles?
Sorry, did we adequately, it was just a word choice. Did we adequately summarize what we were doing about the percentage of commercial to be included?
We're gonna
I think I
bring
might have
that-
been looking at something when you were doing that part of your list.
We're just
were
going to look
looking
at other options to present as other ways to address the mixed use requirement.
Just for the record, Sammy, it's not that I don't agree with the neighborhood. And I think I live downtown. I love taking my bike and doing my chores with it. So I get it. It's awesome. It's just not, don't try not to pinch it or pinhole just to a few things. Let's try to keep it as open as possible. And that's kind of what I was trying to say.
I think with the wide variety of permitted uses and the number of them that will qualify as commercial, that 50% or whatever percent or whatever we propose and is more inclusive and does provide a little flexibility and sparkle and interest for creative development. I think that I'm hoping that's what we can get to with by looking at it. But, and by adding the permitted uses, more permitted uses, that's great suggestions.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
creativity is a great word.
Yeah, I think going through that list is exactly what we needed to do. It allows flexibility, creativity, more opportunity. I think it's exactly what we were looking for. So thank you, Mitch.
Thank you. And I think we'll be great with making sure it doesn't affect the neighbors, because I know I wouldn't want to live next to a manufacturing furniture store, so.
So I think we probably have clear enough direction to staff to support a motion, maybe?
Which would be?
I don't think we need a motion at this time.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think
this
so
is
either.
just direction to us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing we were kind of having a side conversation here about was the hospital specifically. So we have your recommendation about sort of the near term allowing the uses back in the table. But I had made a note too of a conversation you had about having council sort of rehash the hospital issue at a council level. And obviously we're coming back to planning commission with these different topics that you've raised, but that's a bigger conversation for us. If you're saying we're not comfortable with just this near term, council should also go back and have this conversation about the land use designation and the zoning districts and the boundaries and all of that. I mean,
I guess I'll add that some of the comments that are in the comment letter from the hospital district are much broader than what are being contemplated today. They include things that'll need CEQA review, like changing the FAR of the campus and whatnot. And I think we're not clear if that's if you're comfortable with just the change that we contemplated tonight with keeping hospital medical services in the CMU district, or if you're looking for something more broad that we would then bring to council for their input.
In this case, hospital medical uses includes inpatient services?
I think it needs to be broader. It's a super important issue.
It's among other things. That would be the one thing that would be excluded. But I'm just wanted to clarify. In this case, we're saying those could be included in the CMU.
I mean, I think she's asking, are we comfortable with just including that, or are we comfortable including that for now, but would really like to ask council to take a more holistic approach when contemplating what to do with the hospital?
So I just
mean,
get,
big picture, at the time the general plan was adopted, the council thought that the hospital district was moving forward with a very robust and comprehensive master plan. And then late last summer, that was not pursued. So to some degree, we don't have a mandate from the council telling us to revisit the land use designations and zoning for the entire hospital campus. Again, the master plan, the general plan was adopted at a time when the council thought the district was moving forward with a master plan. So some of the comments that we heard today and yesterday from the hospital district are well outside of what's being contemplated right now. And it's not to say they're not important or they're not on the horizon, but they're not part of our current work program. And in order for us to do some of the things that the hospital is looking for would require not only, CEQA review, ordinance amendments, and really big picture council direction and money to tell us to do that.
And the big picture is we don't necessarily know what's in the plan for the hospital. I mean, the hospital's the only one that knows that at this point. So, and at any time they can submit a master plan or a rezoning effort to the town, and then we would work on that with them.
so where does that leave us? I'm confused now. So we're going to,
We proposed a tweak to one of the CMU or the corridor mixed use that would kind of allow current what's going on to go on.
Status quo. essentially.
And then I think Danielle's question was whether you wanted to include a recommendation to the council to direct some kind of process to look at the campus area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, we
Yeah,
do.
I concur.
I mean, even just from an economic point of view, but, I'll stop there.
So I think that'll be part of your actual recommendation when we bring this back. I think Yumi was looking at potential dates that would give us enough time to do all this research.
I think I think you do have to, we will ask you to make a motion, an action to continue this item and to a date and time certain, so we'll still do noticing, but we don't have to do, it's not the same amount of noticing, or it's a different kind of noticing.
What date and time do you propose?
December 17th is the December Planning Commission meeting.
Is that enough time?
Yeah, I think
we
we
can
can get it
I think
done.
we can do that.
There's two very focused areas that you're asking us to look at, and I think we could put efforts towards that.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue this item to the December 17th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
Chair Claren?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gove?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor?
Yes.
Staff reports. Oh, sorry. Motion passes 4-0. Staff reports.
Yeah, I'll make it very quick. We potentially have some development code amendments for your consideration in November. They
right.
are really driven by changes to state law. As is no surprise, you hear me say this a lot, the state is continuing to impose many new laws, in particular related to housing, on cities and counties. And there are a couple that we think will need to happen pretty quickly, and we may have them back for you. That being said, we're still kind of working our way through all the 40-plus bills that the state adopted or that the governor signed a couple weeks ago. And actually, some of them really don't have any discretion involved. They're, the town of Truckee shall do the following. So once we kind of get through that, we may make a decision that it may not actually need commission input because they're so black and white, and we may just do an urgency ordinance in front of the council. But we'll know that within the next week or two.
Would you alert us to that so as commissioners we could just know what's going
Yes.
on?
Yep, we'll keep you in the loop.
Thank you.
Are we going to look at any projects?
There are no projects on your docket for November.
What about December?
There is a Tykert, sorry, I have it right here. The Tykert Quarry, the Martis Quarry, 2-year review. And then
Already?
it's back. And then Tykert Quarry review. So we do have two possibilities for you, though pending this decision that you made tonight to continue to the December meeting.
Any potential projects to review Q1 2025?
The Kid Zone Museum is likely going to be ready. We thought maybe December, not real clear. And now that we have a continued item, it may get pushed to January. And that's a development permit for the new Kid Zone Museum.
I doubt.
So possibly one. And that's a fairly large structure in the regional park.
Thank you.
Any informational items?
Maybe I'll just mention that we're doing something a little bit different. Tomorrow night, we're having sort of a mixer at Moody's to talk about the kind of Truckee's housing site that we got from the High Altitude Fitness Project. So we're calling that now the Edmonds Lofts Project. So we're going to have kind of an informational session where we talk about that. We're going to talk about the STR token program, and then we're going to talk about what I call the T-HOP for developers, because I can never remember the actual name of it. Sorry, Lynn. So we're going to talk deed restriction for new development, I think is what we're calling it. It's very intuitive. I don't know why I can't remember that. So we kind of set that up to try to have a different forum to engage with our development communities. So we'll see how that goes.
What time tomorrow night?
think it starts at 5:30, and we did have it by invitation. So if anyone's listening to this and was like, "Oh, that sparks my interest," they can contact the town. They can contact me or contact Hillary, or there's a few of us who are working on it. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Commission member reports.
I have something to share. Super
always
fun.
makes me nervous.
No, I don't. I usually never do, but anyways, I went down and did one of the escape rooms at Elevation Escape. It is really well done. They did a great job, and it's a cool addition to the community. You should check it out.
I want to know how to get that kind of advertising. That's how. So my only other question is, what's the score? Yankees, Dodgers? 6-4, I heard. Thank you. Who? Yankees? Yeah. Just for all of you out there. And we're adjourned. Do we need to move to adjourn? Do we need to move to adjourn? No.